The front door slammed behind me with a sound that echoed through my soul like a death sentence. There I stood on my own doorstep, staring at 3 packed suitcases that contained 15 years of my life, while my husband Robert glared at me through the window with eyes full of disgust and hatred. Just 2 hours ago, I had been Mrs. Natasha Coleman, secure in my marriage and my home. Now I was a stranger on the sidewalk, cast out like garbage by the man who had promised to love me forever. "You need to leave right now," Robert had said, his voice cold as winter ice when I walked through that same door after my shift at the hospital. "I can't even look at you after what you did to Brianna." My heart had stopped beating for what felt like an eternity. Brianna, his 19-year-old daughter from his first marriage, stood behind him with tears streaming down her face and an expression of pure victory in her eyes. She had been waiting for this moment, and I could see the satisfaction she was trying to hide behind her fake sobs. "Robert, what are you talking about?" I had asked, my voice shaking as I dropped my purse and medical bag. "What did I do to Brianna?" "Don't you dare act innocent," he spat back. "She told me everything. How you've been treating her when I'm not here. The threats you made. The way you tried to turn me against her. I should have listened to her months ago when she first tried to tell me what kind of person you really are." The accusations hit me like physical blows. Threats? Turning him against her? I had bent over backwards to make that girl feel welcome in our home. I had cooked her favorite meals, helped her with college applications, and defended her to Robert when she acted out. I had treated her like my own daughter, and this was how she repaid me. "Robert, please listen to me," I had begged, reaching for his arm. "Whatever she told you isn't true. You know me. You know I would never hurt anyone, especially not your daughter." He jerked away from my touch like I was poison. "She has proof, Natasha. Text messages, recordings. Everything. I've been blind to who you really are, but not anymore." My mind raced, trying to understand what kind of proof she could possibly have. Text messages? Recordings? Nothing made sense because none of it had happened. But looking at Robert's face, I knew he had already made up his mind. The man I had loved and trusted for 15 years had chosen to believe his daughter's lies over the woman who had stood by his side through everything. "I want you out of this house tonight," he continued, his voice getting louder. "I've already packed your things. Don't contact me, don't contact Brianna, and don't even think about coming back here until you're ready to admit what you've done and apologize properly." That's when the full weight of the betrayal hit me. Not only did he believe these lies, but he expected me to confess to things I hadn't done. He wanted me to apologize for crimes I hadn't committed. The injustice of it all made my knees weak, and I had to grab the doorframe to keep from falling. Brianna stepped forward then, putting her hand on her father's shoulder in a gesture that looked loving but felt calculated. "Dad, maybe we should give her a chance to explain herself," she said in a voice that dripped with fake concern. "I mean, I don't want to be the reason your marriage ends." The manipulation was so obvious it made me sick. She was positioning herself as the reasonable one, the forgiving daughter who was willing to give the evil stepmother another chance. But I could see the truth in her eyes. She had planned this moment carefully, and she was enjoying every second of my destruction. "There's nothing to explain," Robert said firmly. "The evidence speaks for itself. Natasha, you have 5 minutes to get your things and leave." I looked around the home we had built together. The pictures on the wall showing our happy moments, the furniture we had picked out as a team, the kitchen where I had cooked thousands of meals for this family. All of it was being taken away from me based on the lies of a spoiled girl who had never accepted me as part of the family. "Robert," I said one final time, my voice barely above a whisper. "Please don't do this. We can work through whatever is wrong. We can get counseling. We can talk to Brianna together and figure out what really happened." He turned his back on me completely. 5 minutes, Natasha. Then I'm calling the police." So here I stood in the driveway, my entire world crashing down around me while neighbors peeked through their curtains to watch the drama unfold. My hands shook as I pulled out my phone to call my sister Carmen. She answered on the second ring. "Tasha? What's wrong?" "Carmen," I said, my voice breaking as the tears finally came. "I need help. Robert just kicked me out of the house. Can you come get me?" "What? I'll be right there. Don't move." As I waited for my sister, I stared at the house that had been my home for 15 years. Robert's shadow moved past the living room window, and I wondered if he felt any doubt about what he had done. Did some part of him know that this was wrong? Or had Brianna's manipulation been so complete that he truly believed I was the monster she had painted me to be? The porch light flickered on, and Robert appeared at the door one last time. For a moment, I thought he might have come to his senses. Maybe he would ask me to come back inside so we could talk this through like adults. Instead, he threw something at my feet. My house keys landed on the concrete with a metallic clang that sounded like the final nail in the coffin of our marriage. "Don't come back," he said simply, then closed the door and turned off the porch light, leaving me standing alone in the darkness. Carmen's apartment had always been my safe haven, but tonight it felt like a life raft in the middle of a storm. She had driven over in record time, helped me load my suitcases into her car, and brought me back to her place without asking too many questions during the ride. Now we sat at her kitchen table while she made coffee with hands that shook almost as much as mine. "Tell me everything," she said, settling into the chair across from me with 2 steaming mugs. "Start from the beginning." I wrapped my hands around the warm ceramic and tried to organize my thoughts. Where did the beginning actually start? When Robert and I got married. When Brianna first moved in with us full-time 3 years ago. Or when I first noticed the way she looked at me when her father wasn't watching. "I think it started about 6 months ago," I said slowly. Brianna began acting different. More distant, more hostile. Little things at first. She would forget to tell me about school events that parents were supposed to attend. She'd eat the leftovers I had planned for dinner and then act innocent when I mentioned it. Carmen frowned. "That doesn't sound like grounds for kicking you out of your own house." "It got worse," I continued. She started contradicting everything I said to Robert. If I mentioned that she came home late, she would swear she had texted me about it. If I said she hadn't done her chores, she would insist she had and that I was just trying to make her look bad. The memories were painful, but I forced myself to recall each incident. There was the time I found marijuana in her backpack and confronted her about it. She had cried to Robert, claiming I had planted it there to frame her. Robert hadn't believed that particular accusation, but I could see doubt creeping into his eyes. Then there was the incident with her college fund. Robert had set aside money for Brianna's education, and I had suggested we move it to a higher yield savings account. Somehow, Brianna twisted this into a story about me trying to steal her inheritance. Again, Robert didn't fully buy it, but the seed of suspicion had been planted. "She's been playing the long game," I said, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. Every lie, every manipulation, it was all building up to tonight. Carmen reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "What exactly did she accuse you of? What kind of proof did she claim to have?" That was the part that confused me most. Robert mentioned text messages and recordings, but I have no idea what he was talking about. I never sent threatening texts to anyone, and I certainly never said anything that could be recorded and used against me. Could she have faked something? I don't know. Maybe. She's always been good with technology. I thought about all the times I had seen Brianna on her phone, fingers flying across the screen. She could have created fake screenshots of text conversations. And with all these apps that can change your voice or create fake audio, who knows what kind of recordings she might have made. Carmen was quiet for a long moment, processing everything I had told her. Finally she spoke. "Tasha, you know you can stay here as long as you need to. But you can't let this stand. If she's fabricated evidence against you, that's not just marriage problems. That's fraud. That could be criminal." The thought hadn't occurred to me, but she was right. If Brianna had created fake evidence to destroy my marriage and reputation, she had committed serious crimes. The question was whether I could prove it and whether Robert would ever believe the truth. "I keep thinking he'll come to his senses," I said. "We've been married for 15 years, Carmen. He knows who I am. He knows I'm not capable of the things she's accusing me of." But even as I said it, I remembered the look in Robert's eyes when he threw my keys at my feet. That wasn't the look of a man having doubts. That was the look of a man who truly believed his wife was his enemy. My phone buzzed on the table, and for a moment my heart jumped with hope. Maybe Robert had realized his mistake. Maybe he was calling to apologize and ask me to come home. Instead, it was a text from my friend Monica at work. "Girl, what is going on? Brianna just posted on social media about you being a toxic stepmother, and how she's finally free from your abuse. This is all over Facebook." My blood ran cold. Not only had Brianna destroyed my marriage, but now she was destroying my reputation publicly. I quickly opened Facebook on my phone and saw the post Monica was talking about. Brianna had written a long, emotional message about living in fear of her stepmother's verbal and emotional abuse. She thanked her father for finally believing her and protecting her. The post already had dozens of likes and comments from people I knew, expressing their shock and support for Brianna. "She's not wasting any time," Carmen said, reading over my shoulder. "She wants to control the narrative before you have a chance to tell your side." I scrolled through the comments, my heart sinking with each one. People I had considered friends were expressing their disgust and disappointment in me. Some were sharing their own stories about recognizing the signs of abuse that they claimed to have seen in me. The lies were spreading like wildfire and I was powerless to stop them. "Carmen, what am I going to do?" I asked, feeling more helpless than I had ever felt in my life. "How do I fight this? How do I prove my innocence when everyone has already decided I'm guilty?" She was quiet for a moment, then stood up and paced around the small kitchen. "First, you document everything. Every lie she's told, every incident you can remember. Write it all down with dates and times. Then you get a lawyer. A good one. I can't afford a good lawyer. All my money is tied up in joint accounts with Robert. Then you get whatever lawyer you can afford and you fight this properly. Tasha, this isn't just about your marriage anymore. This girl has committed defamation at minimum. She's destroying your reputation and your livelihood. You can't just let that slide." As if on cue, my phone rang. It was Dr. Peterson, my supervisor at the hospital. "Natasha, I'm sorry to bother you at home, but we've received some concerning information about a situation in your personal life. I think we need to have a meeting first thing Monday morning." My career. Brianna was going after my career now too. In healthcare, reputation is everything. Even unfounded accusations of abuse could end my ability to work with patients. "Dr. Peterson, I can explain. We'll discuss it Monday. For now, I think it's best if you take a few personal days." The line went dead and I stared at the phone in disbelief. In one evening, I had lost my home, my marriage, and now potentially my career. Brianna's revenge was more thorough than I had imagined. Carmen sat back down and took my hands in hers. "Listen to me, sister. You are going to get through this. You are going to fight back and you are going to win. But first, you need to stop hoping that Robert will save you. He made his choice tonight. Now you need to make yours." She was right. The Robert the first had loved and trusted was gone, replaced by a man who could throw away 15 years of marriage based on his daughter's lies. It was time to stop being the victim and start being my own hero. Monday morning came too quickly, but I was ready for it. I had spent the weekend at Carmen's apartment, documenting every incident I could remember with Brianna, making timelines and preparing for what I knew would be the fight of my life. The meeting with Dr. Peterson was scheduled for 8 a.m., and I arrived 15 minutes early, dressed in my most professional outfit and carrying a folder of notes. Dr. Peterson's office felt different than it ever had before. The same diplomas hung on the walls, the same family photos sat on his desk, but the atmosphere was cold and unwelcoming. He gestured for me to sit across from his desk and I could see the discomfort on his face. "Natasha, this is a difficult conversation for both of us," he began. "I've received several phone calls over the weekend from concerned parties who saw social media posts about allegations involving you and domestic abuse. Dr. Peterson, those allegations are completely false," I said firmly. "I'm the victim of a campaign of lies designed to destroy my reputation and my marriage." He held up a hand to stop me. "I want to be clear that the hospital is not taking a position on the truth or falsehood of these claims. However, we have to consider the impact on our patients and staff. Many of our patients are vulnerable individuals who have experienced trauma. If there's even a possibility that these allegations could affect their care or make them uncomfortable, we have an obligation to act." The injustice of it burned in my chest. "So I'm being punished for accusations that haven't been investigated or proven? You're being placed on administrative leave pending a full review of the situation. If these allegations are proven false, you'll be reinstated with full back pay. But until then we can't risk the liability." Administrative leave. The professional equivalent of being kicked out of my house. I was being cast aside by everyone I had trusted, all because of Brianna's lies. "How long will this review take?" I asked. "That depends on several factors. If criminal charges are filed, we'll have to wait for the legal process to conclude. If not, we'll conduct our own internal investigation." Criminal charges. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. Could Brianna actually file false police reports against me? Would she go that far? I left the hospital feeling numb. In 3 days I had lost my home, my husband, and my job. I sat in my car in the parking lot and called the only lawyer I could afford, Janet Torres, who handled everything from divorces to traffic tickets out of a small office downtown. "Mrs. Coleman, I've been expecting your call," she said when her secretary put me through. "I saw the social media posts over the weekend. Can you be here at noon?" Janet's office was nothing like the fancy law firms you see on TV, but she was sharp and experienced. She listened carefully as I told her everything that had happened, taking notes and asking pointed questions about dates and witnesses. "This is a complex situation," she said when I finished. "We have potential defamation issues, possible fabricated evidence, and now employment problems stemming from false allegations. But before we can address any of that, we need to deal with the immediate threat. What immediate threat? Mrs. Coleman, I've handled enough of these cases to recognize the pattern. This young woman has carefully planned your destruction, and she's not going to stop with what she's already accomplished. I suspect she's building up to filing a police report against you, possibly claiming physical assault or stalking. The thought made me feel sick. But I've never laid a hand on her. I've never stalked anyone in my life. That doesn't matter if she can fabricate evidence. A fake text message threatening her, a staged photo of damage to her property, even a friend willing to lie and say they witnessed something. Once criminal charges are filed, your life becomes infinitely more complicated. Jenna was right and I knew it. Brianna had shown she was willing to lie to destroy me. Why would she stop now when her plan was working so perfectly? What do I do? First, you file for divorce immediately. Don't wait for Robert to come to his senses or try to work things out. He made his choice and now you need to protect yourself legally. Second, we document everything and prepare for the possibility of criminal charges. Third, we consider filing our own lawsuit for defamation and intentional infliction of emotional distress. Divorce. The word felt strange in my mouth, but Janet was right. There was no going back from what had happened. Robert had chosen his daughter over his wife, and I needed to accept that reality. I'll prepare the divorce papers today, I said. What about trying to prove the evidence against me is fake? That's going to be challenging without access to the original files. If she created fake text message screenshots, we would need to examine her phone to prove it. Same with any alleged recordings. And since she's not going to voluntarily hand over her devices, we would need a court order, which means we need grounds for a lawsuit. It felt like a catch-22. I needed proof to file a lawsuit, but I needed a lawsuit to get access to the proof. There is one option, Janet continued. If she files criminal charges against you, discovery in that case could give us access to the evidence. Of course, that means you'd be facing criminal charges while we try to prove your innocence. I left Janet's office feeling more overwhelmed than ever. Every option seemed to involve more risk and more pain. As I drove back to Carmen's apartment, my phone started buzzing with notifications. I pulled over to check them, hoping it might be good news for once. Instead, I found that Brianna had posted another update on social media, this one even more detailed than the first. She was now claiming that I had threatened to have her father's custody rights revoked if she ever told anyone about my abuse. She said I had isolated her from her friends and controlled every aspect of her life when she lived with us. The comments were even worse than before. People were sharing the posts, adding their own commentary about what a monster I was. Some were even calling for the hospital to fire me permanently. My reputation was being destroyed in real time, and there seemed to be nothing I could do to stop it. I was so focused on my phone that I almost didn't see Robert's car pulling up beside me at the red light. When I looked over, he was staring at me with an expression I couldn't read. For a moment, I thought about rolling down my window, trying one more time to reason with him. Then the light turned green and he drove away without acknowledging me at all. That was the moment I knew with absolute certainty that my marriage was over. The man I had loved for 15 years had looked right through me like I was a stranger. Maybe I had been a stranger to him all along. The law office of Torres and Associates was busier than I expected for a Tuesday morning. Janet had squeezed me in between other appointments, and I could hear voices from the conference room next door where she was handling what sounded like a contentious custody case. The parallels weren't lost on me: families being torn apart, children being used as weapons, lives being destroyed by people who claim to love each other. "I've drafted your divorce petition," Janet said, sliding a thick folder across her desk. "I'm asking for temporary spousal support, your fair share of marital assets, and exclusive use of the marital home until the property division is finalized." I stared at the legal documents that would officially end my 15-year marriage. The language was cold and clinical, reducing years of love and partnership to a list of assets and obligations. "Robert's not going to like this," I said. "Robert's opinion isn't relevant anymore," Janet replied firmly. "He forfeited the right to a friendly divorce when he threw you out of your house based on lies. Now we protect your interests first and worry about his feelings never." She was right, but it still felt strange to think of Robert as an adversary instead of a partner. I signed the papers, and Janet promised to have them filed and served by the end of the week. "Now, let's talk about building your defense against Brianna's allegations," she continued. "I've been thinking about this case all night and I have some ideas." Janet pulled out a legal pad covered with notes. "First, we need to establish a pattern of deceptive behavior on Brianna's part. You mentioned several incidents over the past few months where she lied or manipulated situations. Do you have any documentation of these incidents? I thought back through the months of increasingly strange behavior. I started keeping a journal about 3 months ago when things got really bad. I wrote down dates and details of the worst incidents. Good. What about witnesses? Anyone who might have seen her lying or manipulating situations? Carmen was there for a few incidents when she visited. And Monica from work met Brianna a couple of times and commented that she seemed off. I paused, remembering something important. Actually, there was an incident at the grocery store about 2 months ago. Brianna claimed I had screamed at her in public, but the cashier knew me and made a point of telling me later that she hadn't heard any shouting at all. Janet made notes as I talked. We need to contact these witnesses as soon as possible. Memory fades and people move on. The longer we wait, the less reliable their testimony becomes. What about the supposed evidence she has? The text messages and recordings Robert mentioned. That's where things get interesting, Janet said with a slight smile. I've been researching the technology involved in creating fake evidence, and it's easier than most people think. There are apps that can generate fake text message screenshots, software that can alter voice recordings, and programs that can create entirely fabricated conversations. She pulled out her phone and showed me several examples. Look at this. I created a fake text conversation between you and me in about 5 minutes. If I showed this to your husband without context, he might believe we've been planning your defense for weeks instead of days. The fake conversation looked completely authentic. Every detail was perfect, from the font to the timestamps to the delivery indicators. If someone wanted to frame me, they would have all the tools they needed. The problem is proving these items are fake, Janet continued. We would need access to the original devices and the technical expertise to analyze the files. Both of those things cost money we don't have right now. Money. Everything came back to money. The joint accounts I couldn't access, the legal fees I couldn't afford, the expert witnesses I couldn't hire. Brianna had chosen her timing perfectly, striking when I was most vulnerable financially. There might be another way, Janet said. If she's been creating fake evidence, she's had to research how to do it. People don't just know how to fabricate text messages and audio recordings off the top of their heads. She would have searched for tutorials, maybe downloaded apps or software, possibly even practiced with test files. You think there might be a digital trail? Exactly. Browser history, app downloads, deleted files. If we could get access to her devices through a court order, we might find evidence of the evidence fabrication. It was the first hopeful thing I had heard in days. How do we get a court order? We file a lawsuit for defamation and intentional infliction of emotional distress. Then we request discovery, including access to her electronic devices. It's a long shot, but if we can prove she's been systematically creating false evidence to destroy your reputation, we have a strong case. Janet was already sketching out a legal strategy when my phone rang. It was Dr. Peterson from the hospital. Natasha, I'm calling to inform you that we've received a formal complaint about your conduct from Brianna Coleman. She's alleging that you used your position at the hospital to access her medical records without authorization. My heart stopped. That's completely false. I've never accessed her medical records. I wouldn't even know how to do that for someone who isn't my patient. The complaint includes screenshots of what appear to be unauthorized access logs from our computer system, showing your login credentials being used to view her records last month. Fabricated evidence. Just like Janet had predicted. Brianna was escalating her campaign, and now she was going after my professional license as well as my reputation. Dr. Peterson, I need you to investigate those logs immediately. I suspect they've been altered or fabricated. Check the original server records, not just screenshots. We'll look into it, but I have to inform you that this type of allegation is very serious. If proven true, it could result in termination and referral to the state licensing board. After I hung up, Janet was already taking notes. She's moving faster than I expected. This suggests she's either very confident in her fabricated evidence or she's worried that the truth is about to come out. What do you mean? Think about it. She successfully destroyed your marriage and got you kicked out of your house. She could have stopped there and enjoyed her victory. Instead, she's escalating to criminal allegations and professional misconduct. That tells me she's either a sociopath who enjoys destroying people, or she's afraid that someone is going to figure out what she's really done. The possibility that Brianna might be feeling pressure gave me the first sense of hope I had felt since this nightmare began. Maybe she wasn't as in control as she appeared to be. Janet, I want to file that lawsuit. Today if possible. It's going to be expensive and there's no guarantee we'll win. Are you sure you're ready for this fight? I thought about everything I had lost in the past week. My home, my marriage, my job, my reputation. I thought about the lies being spread about me on social media and the friends who had turned their backs on me without even hearing my side of the story. I'm not just ready, I said. I'm done being the victim. It's time to fight back. 3 weeks after Janet filed the defamation lawsuit, the first crack in Brianna's story appeared. I was staying at Carmen's apartment, trying to adjust to my new reality of unemployment and impending divorce, when Monica called with news that made my heart race. Tasha, you need to get down to the hospital right now, she said, her voice tight with excitement. Security just found something in the parking lot footage that you need to see. I had been banned from the hospital property pending their investigation, but Janet said she could accompany me as my legal representative. We met Monica in the security office, where Frank Morrison, the head of security, was waiting with a grim expression on his face. Mrs. Coleman, I owe you an apology, Frank said, gesturing for us to sit. We've been investigating the alleged unauthorized access to Brianna Coleman's medical records, and what we found is very disturbing. He turned his computer monitor toward us, showing security footage from the hospital parking lot. This is from the day in question, the day those access logs show your credentials being used to view her records. The footage showed me walking to my car after my shift, getting in and driving away. The timestamp showed 3:47 p.m. Now look at this, Frank said, pulling up another screen. These are the server logs showing when someone accessed Brianna Coleman's records using your login credentials. The timestamp showed 4:23 p.m. 36 minutes after I had left the hospital. It's impossible for you to have accessed those records, Frank continued. You were already gone. Someone else used your credentials to make those queries, then created fake screenshots to make it look like you had done it. Janet leaned forward, her lawyer instincts kicking in. Do you have any idea who might have had access to Mrs. Coleman's login credentials? Frank pulled out a file folder. That's where this gets really interesting. We've been reviewing all the security footage and access logs for the past 3 months, looking for anything unusual. Watch this. The new footage showed Brianna entering the hospital lobby about 2 weeks before the alleged unauthorized access. I remembered that day she had come to surprise me at work, claiming she wanted to apologize for some of our recent tensions and take me to lunch. She spent 45 minutes in the building that day, Frank said. Most of that time was in areas where she shouldn't have been, including near the computer station where you typically log in. The implications were staggering. Brianna had come to my workplace, gained access to my computer, and somehow obtained my login credentials. Then she had used those credentials later to access her own medical records and create fake evidence that I had violated patient privacy laws. There's more, Monica said, pulling out her own folder. I've been doing some investigating of my own. Remember how Brianna always seemed to know things about your work schedule that you hadn't told her? I started checking our staff communication system. She showed us printouts of internal hospital communications. Someone has been accessing the staff portal using your credentials for months, reading your emails, checking your schedule, even viewing personnel information about other employees. The violation felt deeply personal. 4 months, Brianna had been spying on my professional life, learning my routines and gathering information she could use against me. The supposed unauthorized access of her medical records was just the latest in a long campaign of identity theft and privacy violations. We're turning all of this over to the police, Frank said. What she did constitutes computer fraud, identity theft, and probably several other charges. Dr. Peterson wants to see you in his office immediately to discuss your reinstatement. As we walked through the hospital corridors for the first time in weeks, I felt a mixture of vindication and anger. The truth was finally coming out, but the damage to my life had already been done. My marriage was still over, my reputation was still in ruins, and Robert had still chosen to believe his daughter's lies over 15 years of marriage. Dr. Peterson's apology was sincere but felt hollow. Natasha, I want you to know that the hospital administration deeply regrets how this situation was handled. We should have conducted a proper investigation before taking any action against you. I understand you were trying to protect patients, I said, though part of me wanted to scream about the injustice of it all. What happens now? You're reinstated immediately with full back pay for the time you were suspended. We're also prepared to provide a letter of reference documenting that all allegations against you were proven false, in case you need it for any legal proceedings. Janet was already thinking ahead. We'll need copies of all the security footage and access logs. This evidence is crucial for our defamation case against Brianna. After leaving the hospital, I felt emotionally drained despite the vindication. The truth was emerging, but it felt like too little, too late. My phone had been buzzing all afternoon with notifications, and I finally checked to see what was happening. Carmen had shared the news about the hospital's findings on social media, along with a strongly worded post about the dangers of believing accusations without evidence. Several of my coworkers had added their own comments supporting me and expressing regret for doubting my character. But the most surprising message was from Robert's sister Linda. We had always gotten along well, but she had been conspicuously silent since the accusations began. "Natasha, I need to talk to you. Can we meet for coffee tomorrow? There are things about Brianna you need to know." I showed the message to Janet, who raised an eyebrow. This could be very helpful for our case. Family members often see things that others miss. The next morning, I met Linda at a small cafe downtown, far from our usual neighborhood where I might run into Robert or Brianna. She looked tired and stressed, and I could tell this conversation was difficult for her. "Tasha, I owe you a huge apology," she began before I could even sit down. "I should have spoken up weeks ago, but I was afraid Robert wouldn't believe me, and I didn't want to cause more family drama." "What do you mean?" Linda pulled out her phone and showed me a series of text messages. "Brianna has been texting me for months, asking questions about your marriage, your finances, your work schedule. At the time, I thought she was just trying to understand her new family better, but looking back, I realized she was gathering information to use against you." The text messages were damning. Brianna had asked about when Robert and I had arguments, whether I had access to his bank accounts, and even whether I had ever said anything negative about her. Linda had answered honestly, not realizing she was feeding ammunition to someone planning my destruction. "There's more," Linda continued. "About 2 months ago, Brianna asked me to help her with a school project about voice recording and audio editing. She said she needed to create a presentation about how easy it was to fake recordings for a media literacy class." My blood ran cold. "You helped her learn how to fake audio recordings?" I didn't know that's what she was really doing. She said it was for school. I showed her some basic audio editing software and how to change voice pitch and timing. She was very interested in how to make fake conversations sound real. This was the smoking gun we needed. Brianna hadn't just stumbled onto the idea of fabricating evidence, she had deliberately learned how to do it, using family members to teach her the necessary skills. "Linda, would you be willing to testify about this in court?" She nodded firmly. "Absolutely. What she did to you was wrong, and I can't stay silent anymore. There's something else you should know too. Robert has been having doubts about Brianna's story for the past week." My heart skipped a beat. What kind of doubts? He found some inconsistencies in her story, and when he pressed her for details, she got defensive and angry. "Yesterday he asked me if I thought it was possible that she had lied about you. I told him what I should have told him weeks ago, that you're not capable of the things she accused you of." For a moment, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe Robert was finally seeing through his daughter's manipulation. Maybe there was still a chance to save our marriage. Then I remembered the look of disgust in his eyes when he threw my keys at my feet. I remembered the divorce papers I had signed, the way he had driven past me without acknowledgement, the weeks of silence while my reputation was destroyed. "It's too late, Linda," I said quietly. "Even if Robert realizes he was wrong, too much damage has been done. I can't go back to a marriage where my husband was willing to throw away 15 years based on his daughter's lies." Linda looked sad but understanding. "I'm sorry, Tasha. I really am. Robert made a terrible mistake, and I think he's starting to realize it." "His realization doesn't fix what he broke," I replied. "But your testimony could help me get justice for what Brianna did to me." After Linda left, I called Janet with the news. She was excited about the new evidence and immediately started planning how to incorporate it into our case. "This changes everything," she said. "We now have proof that Brianna deliberately learned how to create fake evidence, we have documentation of her information-gathering campaign, and we have the hospital's evidence that she committed identity theft and computer fraud. What happens next? We file criminal charges against her for fraud and identity theft. We amend our civil lawsuit to include the new evidence. And we prepare for the possibility that she's going to get desperate and do something even more stupid." That evening, I was cooking dinner at Carmen's apartment when my phone rang. The caller ID showed Robert's name, and for a moment I hesitated. We hadn't spoken since the night he kicked me out, and I wasn't sure I was ready for whatever he might say. I answered on the 4th ring. "Natasha." His voice sounded uncertain, almost small. I need to talk to you. Can we meet?" "Robert, I don't think that's a good idea. Please." There are things I need to say, things I need to explain. I think I've made a terrible mistake. The irony wasn't lost on me. For weeks, I had desperately wanted to hear those words. Now that he was finally saying them, I felt nothing but emptiness. The time for explanations was 3 weeks ago, I said calmly. Before you chose to believe lies over 15 years of marriage. Before you threw me out of our home like garbage. Natasha, please. I know I handled this wrong, but if Brianna lied about you, then I need to make this right. If she lied. I couldn't keep the bitterness out of my voice. Robert, she didn't just lie. She committed multiple felonies to destroy my life, and you helped her do it. The hospital has security footage proving she stole my computer credentials. The police are investigating her for identity theft and fraud. But you still say, if she lied. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I don't know what to say, he finally admitted. There's nothing to say. You made your choice. Now I'm making mine. I hung up the phone and turned it off. Tomorrow I would face whatever came next in this legal battle. Tonight, I just wanted to focus on the future I was building for myself, one that didn't include the man who had been so willing to believe the worst about me. The truth has a way of coming out no matter how deeply people try to bury it. Over the next week, Robert's world began unraveling as more evidence of Brianna's deception surfaced. I learned about his growing awareness through Linda, who called me daily with updates about her brother's deteriorating mental state. He's been going through Brianna's room, Linda told me during one of our conversations, looking for evidence that might contradict her story. Yesterday he found a notebook where she had been practicing your handwriting. The image of my husband secretly investigating his own daughter should have given me satisfaction, but instead I felt empty. Where was this careful attention to evidence when he was destroying our marriage? Why hadn't he looked for proof before throwing me out of our home? Linda, I don't want to hear about Robert's regrets anymore, I said firmly. Whatever he's going through now is something he brought on himself. But Tasha, he's really suffering. He barely sleeps, he's not eating. I think he's realizing what he's lost. Good. He should suffer. He should realize what he's lost. But that doesn't change anything. The criminal investigation into Brianna's activities was moving faster than I had expected. Detective Sarah Martinez, who was handling the case, called to update me on their progress. Ms. Coleman, we've obtained a search warrant for Brianna's electronic devices based on the evidence from the hospital. What we found is extensive and damaging to her credibility. I was at Janet's office when the call came, and she put it on speaker so we could both hear the details. Her laptop contains tutorials on creating fake text message screenshots, voice alteration software, and practice files where she was experimenting with fabricating conversations. We also found browser history showing research into computer systems at your hospital, including specific searches about accessing patient records. Is that enough for criminal charges? More than enough. We're preparing charges for identity theft, computer fraud, defamation, and filing false reports. The district attorney's office is reviewing the case now. After Detective Martinez hung up, Janet leaned back in her chair with a satisfied expression. Brianna Coleman is about to learn that actions have consequences. But I suspect she's going to try one more desperate move before she goes down. Jenna was right. That evening, Brianna posted another social media update, this one more desperate and unhinged than her previous posts. She claimed that I was using my connections at the hospital to frame her, that the evidence against her was being fabricated by corrupt hospital administrators who wanted to cover up their mistake in hiring an abusive employee. The post was filled with spelling errors and rambling accusations that didn't make sense. It was clear that the pressure was getting to her, and her usual careful manipulation was being replaced by panic. More importantly, the post's timing was suspicious. It came just hours after the police had searched her devices, which suggested she knew the walls were closing in. My phone rang at 11 p.m. that night. It was Robert, and this time I almost didn't answer. But something in the late hour and the persistence of his calling made me pick up. Natasha, I know you don't want to talk to me, but you need to know what's happening here. His voice sounded shaky, almost frightened. What's happening, Robert? Brianna's gone. She packed her things this afternoon and left. She said she was going to stay with friends until this misunderstanding gets sorted out. But I found something after she left. I waited for him to continue. She left a folder on her desk. I think she meant to take it with her, but she was rushing to leave. It contains printed copies of all the fake evidence she created against you. Screenshots of text conversations that never happened, voice recordings that sound like you threatening her, even fake emails supposedly from you to her friends saying horrible things. The folder was evidence of premeditation. It showed that Brianna had been planning this campaign for months, carefully crafting each piece of fabricated evidence to build her case against me. "There's more," Robert continued, his voice breaking. "There are notes in her handwriting about how to destroy your reputation, how to turn me against you, how to make sure you could never come back. She planned all of this, Natasha. Every single lie." I felt a mixture of vindication and profound sadness. My marriage was over, but at least Robert finally knew the truth about what kind of person his daughter really was. "Robert, I need you to turn that folder over to the police immediately. Don't make copies, don't let anyone else see it, just give it directly to Detective Martinez." "I will. But Natasha, I need you to know how sorry I am. I failed you in every way possible. I chose to believe lies over the woman I promised to love and protect. I threw away 15 years of marriage because I was too blind to see what my daughter really was." His apology felt sincere, but it was also far too late. "I'm sorry too, Robert. I'm sorry that it took criminal evidence to make you realize your wife wasn't your enemy. I'm sorry that you were willing to destroy our marriage to protect someone who was lying to you. But mostly, I'm sorry that the man I loved and trusted was never really who I thought he was." "What do you mean?" "The Robert the first married would have listened to me. He would have investigated before passing judgment. He would have protected me instead of casting me aside. That man either never existed or he died somewhere along the way." There was a long silence on the phone. "Is there any chance? Can we try to work this out? Can we go to counseling or find some way to rebuild what was broken?" The question I had been dreading. 3 weeks ago I would have said yes without hesitation. I would have forgiven him anything just to save our marriage. But 3 weeks ago felt like a lifetime now. "No, Robert. There's no going back from what you did. Even if I could forgive you for believing Brianna's lies, I can't forgive you for how you treated me. I can't forgive you for throwing me out of our home like garbage. I can't forgive you for not fighting for us, for not fighting for me. But if I had known." "You should have known. You should have known me well enough after 15 years to realize I wasn't capable of what she accused me of. You should have cared enough about our marriage to investigate before destroying it. You should have loved me enough to give me the benefit of the doubt." I could hear him crying on the other end of the line, and for a moment my resolve wavered. This was still the man I had loved for 15 years, the man I had planned to grow old with. Then I remembered standing in our driveway with my suitcases, watching him turn off the porch light and leave me in the darkness. "The divorce papers have been filed, Robert. I'm not changing my mind." I hung up the phone and turned it off for the night. Tomorrow would bring more developments in the case against Brianna, more evidence of her deception, and probably more attempts by Robert to win me back. But tonight, for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt truly at peace with my decision. I was choosing myself, choosing my own dignity and self-respect over a marriage that had been built on foundations that were weaker than I had realized. The woman who had been thrown out of her house 3 weeks ago was gone. In her place was someone stronger, someone who wouldn't settle for being anyone's second choice ever again. Robert appeared on Carmen's doorstep exactly 4 weeks after he had thrown me out of our home. I was in the kitchen making breakfast when the doorbell rang, and through the window I could see him standing there with flowers in one hand and what looked like a jewelry box in the other. He looked terrible. His usually neat hair was disheveled, he had lost weight, and there were dark circles under his eyes that suggested he hadn't been sleeping. For a moment I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Carmen answered the door and I could hear their conversation from the kitchen. "She doesn't want to see you, Robert," Carmen said firmly. "Please, Carmen. I know I made mistakes, but I need to talk to her. I need to explain what I've learned about Brianna, and I need to ask for her forgiveness. You had weeks to figure out the truth. You chose to believe lies instead. Now you live with the consequences. 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking for." I took a deep breath and walked to the door. Robert looked up at me with desperate hope in his eyes. "Hello, Robert." "Natasha, thank God. I've been trying to reach you, but your phone goes straight to voicemail. I changed my number." "Carmen, it's okay. I can handle this." My sister gave Robert a warning look and retreated to the kitchen, though I knew she was listening to every word. "Can I come in?" "No. Whatever you have to say, you can say it from there." He held out the flowers, and when I didn't take them, he set them on the porch railing. "I brought these for you. And this." He opened the jewelry box to reveal a diamond necklace I had admired months ago at a jewelry store. "You think gifts are going to fix what you broke?" "No, I just wanted to show you that I've been thinking about you, that I remember what makes you happy." "What would make me happy, Robert, is if you had listened to me 4 weeks ago when I told you Brianna was lying. What would make me happy is if you had chosen to trust your wife over your daughter's accusations. What would make me happy is if you had acted like a partner instead of a judge and jury. He stepped closer to the door and I could see tears in his eyes. I know I failed you. I know I made the worst mistake of my life. But I was scared, Natasha. When your child comes to you claiming abuse, it's hard to think rationally. I was your wife, Robert. For 15 years I was your wife. That should have counted for something. It did count. It does count. That's why I'm here. I've seen all the evidence now. I know what Brianna really did and I know what kind of person she is. The police showed me everything they found on her computer, all the fake evidence she created, all the planning she did to destroy your reputation. I had already heard about the evidence from Detective Martinez, who had called to inform me that formal charges were being filed against Brianna. She was facing multiple felony counts, and if convicted, she could serve several years in prison. So now that you have proof you want me back, I said. Now that the police have confirmed what I was telling you all along, suddenly I'm worth believing. It's not like that. It's exactly like that. You needed strangers with badges to convince you that your wife wasn't a monster. That tells me everything I need to know about what our marriage really meant to you. Robert was crying openly now, and part of me wanted to comfort him the way I had for 15 years. But that part was getting smaller every day, replaced by something harder and more self-protective. Natasha, please. I'll do anything to make this right. We can go to counseling. I'll get therapy to figure out why I handled this so badly. We can start over, rebuild our trust. I reached into my purse and pulled out an envelope I had been carrying for 2 days, waiting for this moment. Here, I said, holding it out to him. What is this? Divorce papers. Signed and finalized. Our marriage is over, Robert. The color drained from his face as he opened the envelope and saw the official documents inside. You can't mean this. After everything we've been through together, after 15 years. After 15 years, you threw me away based on lies. After 15 years, you chose to believe I was capable of abusing your daughter rather than investigating the truth. After 15 years, you decided I wasn't worth the benefit of the doubt. But I know better now. I understand what really happened. And that's exactly the problem. You needed to be proven right instead of trusting me. You needed evidence instead of faith. You needed confirmation instead of love. I watched him struggle with the reality of what I was saying. For weeks, he had probably imagined this moment going differently. He had probably believed that once he apologized and admitted his mistake, I would forgive him and we would rebuild our marriage. I don't accept this, he said, holding up the divorce papers. I'm going to fight it. I'm going to prove to you that our marriage is worth saving. Robert, the divorce is already final. You can't fight it because I'm not asking for anything you don't want to give me. I'm not trying to take the house or demand alimony. I'm not making claims on your retirement or asking for half of everything we built together. What do you mean? I mean I'm walking away clean. I'm taking my personal belongings, my car, and my freedom. That's all I want from this marriage. The realization hit him like a physical blow. You don't want anything from me. That's right. I don't want your money, your house, or your guilt. I just want to be free of the man who was willing to throw me away so easily. He sank down onto Carmen's porch steps, still clutching the divorce papers. This can't be how it ends. 15 years can't just be over like this. 15 years ended the night you put my suitcases on the front porch and told me not to come back. This is just the paperwork. I started to close the door, but he called out to me one last time. Natasha, I love you. I've always loved you and I always will. If I could take back what I did, if I could go back and handle things differently. But you can't. And even if you could, it wouldn't matter. Because now I know who you really are when things get difficult. Now I know that your love has conditions, and that 15 years of marriage isn't enough to earn me the benefit of the doubt. That's not fair. Fair? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. You want to talk about fair? Was it fair when you believed your daughter's lies without investigation? Was it fair when you threw me out of my own home? Was it fair when you let my reputation be destroyed on social media while you stayed silent? You had no answer for that. The divorce is final, Robert. Move on with your life and let me move on with mine. I closed the door and locked it, leaving him sitting on the porch with wilted flowers and expensive jewelry that couldn't buy back what he had destroyed. Through the window, I watched him sit there for almost an hour, staring at the divorce papers like he couldn't believe they were real. Finally, he got up, left the flowers and jewelry on the porch railing, and walked back to his car. Carmen came and stood beside me as we watched him drive away. How do you feel? She asked. I thought about it for a moment. Free, I said finally. For the first time in 4 weeks, I feel completely free. The man who had been my husband for 15 years was gone, and in his place was a stranger who had shown me what conditional love looked like. I was done with conditional love, done with having to prove my worth to people who should have known it already. It was time to build a life where I was valued, trusted, and cherished without having to earn it every day. The news of Brianna's arrest spread through our community like wildfire. Within hours of Detective Martinez taking her into custody at her friend's house, my phone was buzzing with messages from people who had shunned me just weeks before. Now they wanted to apologize, to explain that they had been deceived, to somehow make amends for believing the lies. I ignored most of them. Janet called me that evening with updates from the district attorney's office. Brianna has been charged with 6 felony counts: identity theft, computer fraud, filing false reports, defamation, fraud, and stalking. Her bail has been set at $50,000. Is Robert going to post bail for her? That's where things get interesting. According to my sources, he's refusing to have any contact with her. She's been trying to call him from jail, but he won't accept the charges. The thought of Brianna sitting in a jail cell, finally facing consequences for her actions, should have given me satisfaction. Instead, I felt empty. My reputation was in ruins, my marriage was over, and my life had been turned upside down. Her punishment wouldn't undo any of that damage. There's something else you should know, Janet continued. Robert's attorney contacted me today. He wants to discuss a settlement. What kind of settlement? He's offering to give you the house, half of all marital assets, and substantial alimony. Apparently, he feels guilty about how this all played out. I thought about the house where we had been happy for so many years, the home where I had planned to grow old with Robert. Now it felt tainted, filled with memories of betrayal and broken trust. I don't want it, Janet. I don't want anything from him. Natasha, you're entitled to half of everything you built together. You worked throughout your marriage, you contributed to your joint assets, you have legal rights to. I don't care about legal rights. I want to start fresh, with nothing that ties me to him or reminds me of what I lost. Janet was quiet for a moment. Are you sure about this? You could be giving up hundreds of thousands of dollars. Money can't buy back my dignity or my peace of mind. I'd rather have less and be truly free than have more and feel like I owe him something. After we hung up, I sat in Carmen's living room and thought about the future I wanted to build. I had been so focused on clearing my name and getting through the divorce that I hadn't really considered what came next. The next morning brought an unexpected visitor. Linda knocked on Carmen's door, looking nervous and carrying a large box. I hope it's okay that I came by, she said when I answered. I have some things that belong to you. The box contained personal items from my marriage photo albums, jewelry, books, small keepsakes that Robert had apparently asked Linda to return to me. How is he doing? I asked, though I wasn't sure I really wanted to know. Not well. He's been staying at my house since Brianna was arrested. He can't bear to be in your house alone, knowing what he did there. Linda sat down on Carmen's couch and looked at me with sad eyes. He asked me to tell you something if you're willing to listen. Linda, please don't. I've heard his apologies and they don't change anything. This isn't an apology. He wanted you to know that he's selling the house. He can't stand to live there anymore, knowing how he treated you in the place you should have felt safest. That surprised me. The house had been Robert's pride and joy, the first major purchase we had made as a married couple. He's also entered therapy, Linda continued. He wants to understand how he could have been so wrong about someone he loved, and how he could have been so easily manipulated by his own daughter. I'm glad he's getting help, I said, and I meant it. But that doesn't change what happened between us. I know. He knows too. He's not trying to win you back anymore, Natasha. He's just trying to figure out how to live with what he's done. After Linda left, I looked through the box of memories she had brought. Wedding photos where we looked so young and hopeful. Vacation pictures from trips we had taken together. Love letters Robert had written to me during our early years of marriage. It was like looking at the life of a different person, someone who had trusted completely and loved without reservation. That woman was gone, replaced by someone warier but stronger. My phone rang, interrupting my trip down memory lane. It was Dr. Peterson from the hospital. Natasha, I'm calling with some good news. The board of directors met yesterday to discuss your case, and we've decided to offer you the position of assistant director of nursing. The promotion was significant, both in terms of responsibility and salary. It was also a clear statement from the hospital administration that they regretted how they had handled the initial allegations against me. I'm honored by the offer, Dr. Peterson, but I need some time to think about it. Of course. Take all the time you need. But I want you to know that this hospital values you, and we're committed to making sure nothing like this ever happens again. After hanging up, I realized that I was at a crossroads. I could accept the promotion and rebuild my career at the hospital where I had worked for years. Or I could use this as an opportunity to start completely fresh somewhere else. Carmen found me sitting on her back porch that evening, staring at the sunset and thinking about my options. "You know you can stay here as long as you need to," she said, settling into the chair next to mine. "I've been thinking about that. About staying, I mean. Is this where I want to rebuild my life, in the same town where everyone knows my business and has an opinion about what happened to me? Where would you go?" I had been researching opportunities in other cities, places where I could start fresh without the baggage of the past few months. "There's a hospital in Denver that's looking for an experienced nurse manager. The mountains, fresh air, a place where nobody knows my story." Running away? No. Running toward something better. Carmen was quiet for a moment. "You know, 6 months ago I would have said you were crazy to even consider leaving Robert. You two seemed so solid, so perfect together." "We weren't perfect. I can see that now. I was just so invested in the image of our marriage that I ignored the cracks in the foundation." "What do you mean?" "Robert always had trouble trusting my judgment when it came to his daughter. Even before this happened, he would take her side in small disputes, dismiss my concerns about her behavior. I told myself it was natural for a father to be protective, but really it was a sign that he didn't value my opinion as much as I thought. It was the first time I had articulated that realization, and saying it out loud felt liberating. I spent 15 years trying to be the perfect wife, the understanding stepmother, the woman who never complained or demanded too much. And in the end, none of that mattered because he was willing to throw me away the moment things got difficult. Carmen reached over and squeezed my hand. "So what are you going to do?" I looked at the sunset painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, and for the first time in months, I felt truly hopeful about the future. "I'm going to take the job in Denver. I'm going to start over in a place where I can be whoever I want to be, not defined by what happened to me here." "And if Robert tries to stop you?" "He has no right to stop me. He made his choice 4 weeks ago when he threw my suitcases on the front porch. Now I'm making mine." 6 months later, I stood in the lobby of Denver General Hospital, wearing scrubs with "Nurse Manager" embroidered below my name. The mountains were visible through the large windows, snow-capped peaks that reminded me daily that I was living a completely different life now. The transition hadn't been easy. Those first weeks in Denver were lonely, filled with the challenge of learning new systems, meeting new colleagues and adjusting to life in an unfamiliar city. But with each passing day, I felt stronger and more confident in my decision to start fresh. My new apartment was small but comfortable, with a balcony that looked out toward the mountains. I had furnished it slowly, choosing each piece carefully instead of just filling space. Everything in my new home was chosen by me, for me, with no compromises or considerations for anyone else's preferences. The work was challenging but rewarding. I was managing a team of 40 nurses across 3 departments, implementing new patient care protocols, and working on projects that would improve outcomes for thousands of patients. It was the kind of professional challenge I had always wanted but never had the opportunity to pursue while I was focused on supporting Robert's career and managing family dynamics. My phone rang while I was reviewing staffing schedules for the upcoming week. Carmen's name appeared on the screen and I smiled as I answered. "Hey sister. How's life in the mountains?" "Good. Really good actually. How are things back home?" Carmen updated me on family news and local gossip before getting to what I knew was the real reason for her call. Robert's trial against Brianna's civil case starts next week. After Brianna's criminal conviction and sentencing to 3 years in prison, Robert had filed a civil lawsuit against his daughter for the financial and emotional damages her lies had caused. Janet was representing him, having taken the case on a contingency basis. "How is he doing?" "Linda says he's focused on the case but still struggling. Therapy is helping, but he's having a hard time accepting that his daughter is really the person the evidence shows her to be." I felt a pang of sympathy for Robert, despite everything that had happened between us. Learning that your child is capable of such calculated cruelty had to be devastating. "And how are you doing with all of this?" Carmen asked. "Any regrets about your decision to start over?" I looked out my office window at the mountains and thought about the question. None. For the first time in my adult life, I'm making decisions based entirely on what I want and what makes me happy. It's liberating in a way I never expected. No loneliness? No second thoughts about the divorce. I go to dinner with colleagues sometimes. I've joined a hiking group that explores different trails on weekends. I'm taking a pottery class on Thursday evenings. I'm building a life that's entirely mine, Carmen, and it feels incredible. It was true. The loneliness I had feared never materialized because I was too busy discovering who I was when I wasn't trying to be someone's wife or stepmother. What about dating? Any romantic prospects in your new life? I laughed. I'm not ready for that yet. I need to be completely comfortable being alone before I consider being with someone else. I spent so many years defining myself through my relationship with Robert that I need time to figure out who Natasha is when she's not attached to anyone. After we hung up, I reflected on how much I had changed in just 6 months. The woman who had begged Robert to listen to her, who had desperately wanted to save her marriage, felt like a stranger now. In her place was someone who had learned to value her own opinion above all others, someone who would never again accept being treated as less than she was worth. That evening I was preparing dinner when my doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, and for a moment I wondered if it might be Robert. He had discovered my address somehow and had sent several letters over the past few months, all of which I had returned unopened. Instead, I found a delivery person holding a large bouquet of flowers. Natasha Coleman? That's me. He handed me the flowers and a small envelope. These are from a Robert Coleman. He asked me to tell you that he's not trying to win you back or change your mind about anything. He just wanted you to know he's proud of how you've rebuilt your life. After the delivery person left, I sat on my couch and stared at the flowers. They were beautiful white roses mixed with baby's breath, elegant and simple. Nothing like the desperate bouquet he had brought to Carmen's door months earlier. I opened the envelope and found a short note written in Robert's familiar handwriting. Natasha, I saw the article about your promotion in the Denver newspaper. I'm proud of what you've accomplished and the strength you've shown. I know you don't want to hear from me and I respect that. This is goodbye. I hope you find all the happiness you deserve. Robert. The article he mentioned was a feature piece about innovative patient care programs that had run in the Denver Post. I had been interviewed as part of the hospital's new leadership team, and the article had been picked up by several other newspapers. I sat there holding Robert's note, feeling a complex mix of emotions. There was sadness for what we had lost, anger for how it had ended, and something that might have been forgiveness for the man who had made such a terrible mistake. But there was also something else, a recognition that this was truly the end of our story. Robert was finally letting me go completely, without conditions or expectations. In a strange way, it felt like the most respectful thing he had done since the night he threw me out. I put the flowers in a vase and placed them on my kitchen table. They would remind me not of what I had lost but of how far I had come. My phone buzzed with a text from my hiking group leader. Great weather for tomorrow's trail. You still planning to join us for the sunrise hike? I typed back quickly. Wouldn't miss it. These were the relationships I valued now, uncomplicated friendships based on shared interests and mutual respect. People who knew me as Natasha, the nurse manager, the hiking enthusiast, the pottery student. Not as someone's wife or victim or cautionary tale. As I prepared for bed that night, I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror and saw someone I barely recognized from a year ago. My hair was shorter, styled in a way that was practical for my active lifestyle. My face looked younger, free from the stress lines that had deepened during those final months of my marriage. My eyes were clear and confident. I was 38 years old, and for the first time in my adult life, I belonged completely to myself. 1 year after Robert had thrown my suitcases onto the front porch, I stood in Janet's law office in my hometown, signing the final documents that would close the chapter on that painful period of my life. I had flown back to testify in Robert's civil case against Brianna, and the jury had awarded him substantial damages for the lies that had destroyed his marriage and reputation. The judge ordered her to pay $200,000 in damages, Janet explained as I signed the paperwork. Of course, she's unlikely to have that kind of money for years, if ever. But the judgment will follow her for the rest of her life. Brianna had been released from prison after serving 18 months of her 3-year sentence. According to Linda, she was living in another state, working in retail, and struggling to rebuild any kind of normal life. The felony convictions on her record made finding good employment nearly impossible. What about Robert? I asked. How did he handle the trial? It was difficult for him. Having to testify about what his daughter did, listening to all the evidence about her planning and manipulation. But I think it was also therapeutic in a way. He finally got to tell his side of the story, to explain how he was deceived. I had been in the courtroom for my own testimony, and I had seen Robert for the first time in months. He looked older, grayer, but there was something peaceful about his demeanor that hadn't been there during our marriage. Therapy and the passage of time seemed to have helped him find some measure of acceptance about what had happened. He asked me to give you something, Janet said, pulling an envelope from her desk drawer. Janet, I told you I don't want. It's not what you think. Just look at it. Inside the envelope was a check made out to me for $100,000, half of the damages Robert had been awarded in the civil case. He wants you to have half of the judgment, Janet explained. He said that Brianna's lies destroyed your life just as much as they destroyed his, and you deserve compensation for what you went through. I stared at the check, overwhelmed by the gesture. Robert could have kept the money, could have justified it as compensation for the pain of losing his marriage. Instead, he was sharing it with me, acknowledging that I had been a victim too. There's a note with it, Janet said. Robert's handwriting was neater than usual, as if he had taken special care with this message. Natasha, this money can't undo what happened, but I hope it can help you build the life you deserve. You were always the strongest person I knew. Seeing how you've rebuilt yourself after what I did to you only confirms that. Use this to buy a house, take a dream vacation, or just have security and peace of mind. You've earned it. I'm sorry for everything. Robert. I folded the note carefully and put it back in the envelope. Janet, I need you to do something for me. Of course. I want you to donate this money to the hospital's victim advocacy program. All of it. I want it to go toward helping other people who have been falsely accused or had their lives destroyed by lies. Janet looked surprised. Natasha, this is a substantial amount of money. You could buy a house, pay off debt, secure your future. I've already secured my future, Janet. I did it myself, without Robert's money or anyone else's help. This money represents the worst period of my life and I don't want it. But maybe it can help someone else who's going through what I went through. After signing the donation paperwork, I drove through my old neighborhood for the first time since moving to Denver. The house Robert and I had shared was sold, with a young family's toys scattered across the front yard. It looked happy and lived in, the way it had when Robert and I were first married. I felt no sadness seeing it. The woman who had been dragged from that house in shame was gone, replaced by someone stronger and more self-assured. My phone rang as I was driving to the airport. It was Dr. Martinez from Denver General. Natasha, I hope your trip is going well. I'm calling with some exciting news. The board of directors approved your proposal for the new trauma counseling program. You'll have a budget of $500,000 to implement it over the next 2 years. The trauma counseling program was my passion project, a comprehensive support system for patients and families dealing with sudden medical crises. It was based on my own experience of having my world turned upside down and needing to rebuild from nothing. That's wonderful news, Dr. Martinez. I can't wait to get started. There's more. The program has attracted attention from other hospitals in the region. We've received inquiries about expanding it system-wide, which could mean a promotion to Regional Director of Patient Services for you. Regional Director. It was a position I never could have imagined achieving when I was focused on being the perfect wife and stepmother. Now, it felt like a natural progression of the career I was building entirely on my own merits. On the plane back to Denver, I thought about the journey that had brought me to this moment. A year ago, I had been a woman whose identity was completely tied to her marriage, who measured her worth by how well she supported her husband's happiness. The betrayal and divorce had felt like the end of everything. Instead, it had been the beginning. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through the photos from my recent hiking trip to Rocky Mountain National Park. There I was at the summit of a 14,000-foot peak, arms raised in triumph, surrounded by friends who knew nothing about my past except that I was someone who showed up, worked hard, and could be counted on. That was who I was now, not Robert's ex-wife, not the victim of Brianna's lies, but simply Natasha. A woman who had lost everything and discovered that everything she really needed had been inside her all along. As the plane descended toward Denver, I could see the mountains in the distance, bathed in golden afternoon light. Tomorrow I would return to work on projects that mattered to me. This weekend I would join my hiking group for a camping trip in the wilderness. Next month I was planning a solo vacation to Italy, something I had always wanted to do but never had the confidence to attempt while married. My life was full of possibilities now, limited only by my own imagination and courage. And after everything I had survived, I had learned that my imagination was limitless and my courage was stronger than I had ever believed possible. The plane touched down in Denver as the sun was setting behind the mountains. I gathered my things and walked toward the terminal, toward my new life, toward a future that belonged entirely to me. Behind me, in a city I would probably never visit again, Robert was learning to live with the consequences of his choices. Brianna was struggling with the reality that actions have lasting consequences. The people who had believed lies about me were dealing with their own guilt and regret. But ahead of me were mountains to climb, dreams to pursue, and a version of myself I was still discovering. The woman who had once begged for her husband's trust now trusted herself completely. The woman who had once been thrown away like garbage had learned that she was precious beyond measure. I walked through the Denver airport with my head high, my steps confident, and my heart full of gratitude for the journey that had brought me home to myself. The story that had begun with betrayal and heartbreak had ended with triumph and joy. Not because I had gotten my old life back, but because I had built a new one that was infinitely better. Sometimes the best revenge is simply living well.